So installing Node is quite simple. There are two ways to install nodes. So the first one would be to use NVM. So what it stands for is Node Version Manager. It's easier to manage and install future versions of Node.js. Like myself, I use multiple versions of Node.js depending on the project. And then the second option would be to install Node directly. There is an installer available on their website, but I see no reason to do that anymore these days because NVM just makes it easier to manage and install. So I'm just going to give a demo on how to use NVM. Do we have Zoom? Okay. So we have, I have a Node.js project here. I have all the build, just config as Node modules. So with npm, these three files and folder is what npm will be generating. You have the, sorry, let's move up a bit. Okay, so we have the package.json and package log, as well as the Node modules. Package.json maintains a list of packages that you are using with the project. Package log.json, however, will capture the moment you install those packages with what version you're doing. And then Node modules will actually store those libraries or tools that you're using in your project, which I will show you in a moment. So if I use NVM, I can do something like use 16, and that would make me to use Node version 16. So right now I'm using 16 for this particular project. So let's go to another project of mine. I think this one would be nice. Okay, so let's see what version is this. 16 as well. Okay, maybe that's the wrong folder, but never mind. We can use other version now. All right, so now I'm using Node version 14. So that would be very easy for me to change. So why would I need to use different Node versions depending on the projects? So the first reason is that when you join a company, you won't be working alone and you will be inheriting code base from someone else. So if that project is using Node 14, you're supposed to use the same version, or at least the same major version that they use, so that all your programs runs in the same manner as they do. Because with each major versions, there are deprecated functions or deprecated classes that is dropped from the new major versions. So right now, I think we're on version 20 or 18. I'm not particularly sure. So let me explain a bit about the versioning. So it follows semantic versioning. The one in front is the major versions. The one at the back is the minor versions. And the last one would be the build version. So for each major version, there is a difference. For every even number, like 14, 16, 12, 8, 18, 20, those are the Node versions that has LTS. So what LTS means is that it's a long-term support. So what this means is that for specific versions of Node, they have a long shelf life. In a way, any bugs, any critical issues, the Node.js team will fix them for those even number versions longer than the odd version numbers. So for example, on Node 17, they might stop supporting it, I think about 6 months or 1 year in. And then after that, they'll move on to the next versions. So just an example. Okay, so a basic structure of Node.js, which I'm gonna show you right now. It's this one. Yep. All right. So we have an editor here. So all right. So we have an editor here. So with every npm package that you use, you can either enter it here or you can use the terminal to do something like npm install save course, and then it would add itself to the package JSON. So for example, if I were to install course, it would add itself here. So now this is something new. And at the same time, if I were to remove all these dependency in my project, which exists in the Node modules, it's not here. Usually it's hidden. In the Node modules, it stores all the binaries that we need to do, we need to use to run any of these libraries. If I haven't have that yet, so for example, I have in my Node modules, ls, I have lots of stuff in this project. So these are all the stuff in it. We have a question. Can you briefly explain dependencies? Yes, I can. I will explain it briefly. No worries. So let's say I would remove the Node modules. This would happen when you just started to write your program. So rep modules. Okay, let's imagine that this is a new project. So I would do something like npm install. So what this would do is that it will download all the dependencies of my whatever I specify in package JSON. Enter. So this would take a long time actually, because I am okay. It did not take as long as I thought it would. So yeah, so it's not that a lot. So right now I am using a package with high severity vulnerability. I don't really care right now because this is just an interview questions that I've done before. But if a pen tester were to look at this, I will get an earful. All right. So we have ts config. This one is irrelevant for now. Okay, so for package log, it will try to kind of store whatever version that you're currently using. So for example, I specify 202 here, but for some people, they may specify just 2.0. And then it has this symbol here, which means I want this dependency to be roughly around version 2.0.2. But when I do install them, I get the exact version number. Let's say the rest of it, I get the same one. Most of it, I get the same one. So yeah. So what this help is that when you have a package log JSON, you know that what other people are using, which version that they're using, because sometimes the dependencies break between versions and you would have to make a lot of changes that the other team members are not ready yet. So you're supposed to use the same versions of everything. Okay, so I'm going to explain briefly about dependencies. Oh, okay. So let's say I'm using, okay, Nanoid here, Nano ID, not Nanoid, Nano ID here. So I've downloaded the package and I want to use it in my code. So let's see, where did I use this? All right. So I have a class here, deposit plan controller, and I've used Nano ID. And then in the register deposit plans, I created a deposit plan with a Nano ID with the length of 8. So there's going to be 8 string length for Nano ID, and I'm going to use that as an ID. So I think you're familiar with the concept of database indexes, and the ID for each record would usually be incremented. Like you start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and it can never be duplicated or redundant. It will always be unique. So in this case, I'm using nano ID as a simple way to create kind of identifier. In actual world, in actual programming cases, we would actually use something called UUID. So a UUID would be to generate, I think, about three phrases randomly generated, alphanumerics, and that is used to that's used for identifiers. And for random UUID, there can be a duplicate UUID, but depending on the length of UUID, you might not even encounter the same UUID within your records in 5 million years. It would actually take you about 5 million years to have a redundant UUID. So it's very, very, very random. Okay, so where do you look for dependencies? At this point, I might just share my whole screen. Okay. All right, so let's say we go to this here. We go to npm.js. So for Node.js or anything JavaScript that you're doing, you can go to npm. All right. You can go to npm, and most of the stuff, actually all of the stuff here are free. I mean, open source. So it takes a lot of people to do this. There is no crypto. Okay, JS, crypto.js. Yes, here it is. So let's say I want to create like UUIDs. I would probably use let's say I want to encrypt passwords. So I can use crypto.js for that. So what I would do is npm install crypto.js, and then it has an example as well. Depending on what you want to do with that dependency. There's probably more documentation somewhere else, but then it doesn't show as much. Maybe it's here. It's not shown here, but you probably get tutorials for that. And other stuff with something like React. If you're doing React, it's also on npm. You're supposed to install that package. You're supposed to install that package as well. So something like this, it gives you the rough overview, the examples, and the proper documentation. So you can explore on npm what you can do. There are also APIs that is wrapped with JavaScript class. So let's say we have Stripe. We have Stripe. We have Web3. So if you're interested in Web3, you can do that. Day.js, Postgres. There's quite a lot of packages that you can use. Previously, they did give like popular packages, but I don't think that's there anymore. So that's dependencies. Have I answered your questions? I need to scroll the chat every time. What separates a library and a dependency? A library is a dependency. A framework can be a dependency. A piece of module can be a dependency. A dependency is an umbrella term that's used to describe if you're depending on something else, it's probably a dependency. And even when you're doing codes internally, it can also be a dependency. For example, let's say I have a code here, and I have let's remove this. I have a deposit plan controller again, and I kind of define services that I need. So these are actually dependencies definition that I want to kind of use. So I get that using dependency injection. So these are one of the concepts that you will learn with programming. So what it does is that every time I create a deposit plan controller, I also have to pass the user service, the portfolio service, and the deposit plan service. And then for each of these service, I can use it in my code. So this is a bit advanced, I guess, for now, but I'm just going to show you anyway, since we still have time. So let's say user service. So with user service, I can directly call find by email and then just pass email. And then I would get the corresponding user. So let's see the implementation of a user service. I have find by email, and then I have another dependency, which is a repository. So this repository comes from user repository. Now I abstract it even further, because if I have business logic, I can put it in my service. But if I want to access the data layer, I would store it in the repository. So let's see what find by email in the repository does. So what it does is that it gets from the database the user email, and then I would return a user object based on those results. So we have result ID, name, email, password, created ad, and updated ad. So it would then return to the service. The service would then return to the controller, and from the controller, it will return to the client where I do response.send. So I pass back the deposit plan as well as the allocations of this one. And where do I define how to read, how to hit this endpoint? I do it here. Yes, here. I would do a slash deposit plan, and then I would bind this function to this route. So every time this route is hit, this will run, and it has to be a post request. So that is how I do my codes.